Okay, here we are for our look at our first chord. This is it. This is D. And this is the first chord that we're going to be learning in this little course. So what we're going to do whenever we learn a new chord, we're always going to do it one finger at a time. And we're going to start always with our first finger, then the second finger, then the third finger, then the fourth finger if we need it. So what I want you to do is just have a little look at that neck diagram. And we're looking for where the first finger goes. Now the first finger you'll see is there on the third string, because we start from the thinner string. So 1, 2, 3, the third string, and it's in the second fret. So the double lines on the neck diagram, that's the nut there. This would be the first fret, this would be the second fret. So the first finger, the correct position is right here where you're watching it right now. Now make sure as well that you remember that the finger needs to be quite close to the fret, not like right back here. That would be bad. So up fairly close to the fret, not on top of it, that'll be bad too. So kind of just back here a little bit. So that's first finger out of the way. And also remembering that we're using the tip of our finger, don't try and put your finger down too flat. You're really thinking just on the very tips of your fingers there is the bit that should be holding the string down. Now if we look at now the second finger, you'll notice that one is in the same fret as the first finger, but on the thinnest string, so it's kind of going underneath. And again, making sure that you're using the tip of your finger there. That one shouldn't be too hard to put down. Now, the last one, third finger. Now, third finger is going in the third fret of the second string, so the string in between the ones where the other two fingers are on. So, and you can, just a good way of helping remember this as well is that it kind of looks like a D. If you look at the kind of the shape of the notes, it kind of looks a little bit like a D, so that might help. Anyway, the thing that you might find now is that the third finger is falling right back here at the back of the fret, and really we want to get that third finger right up as close to the fret as we can. This is something that will take a little bit of practice. If it's hard right now and it's stuck down there, just keep trying to push it forward. Even if you have to get your other hand and kind of stretch it up, that's okay. But try and get used to that stretch and try and get your fingers in a really good position right from the beginning. Now what's really important when you're doing your chords is that you check that every note in the chord sounds really good, because that's the way that you'll make sure that your chords sound great right from the beginning and you won't develop any bad habits. So if you have a look at that neck diagram again, you'll see that the thickest two strings have both got an X at the top, which means that we don't play them. So what we're starting on, the first note we're going to be picking is the fourth string. Now generally what I say to people is to do a strum, a pick out and a strum. So starting from the fourth string, that's the kind of the third thickest string, we do a strum first. And if you're doing really well, it'll sound like that. If you're not doing so well, it might sound like this. Something like that, yeah? So what we're going to do now is we're going to try and tailor the chord and make sure that every note is sounding good, and I'm going to show you where some of the problem areas are for a lot of people. So, the first thing, the fourth string. If that one's not ringing out very clearly, then probably the tip of your first finger is touching that string. So make sure that you bring your first finger down just a little bit so you get a nice clear fourth string. Now we're on to the third string, which is the one that's got our first finger on it. That one should sound nice and clear there. And if that one's not working, like not a nice clear note, a couple of things could be the culprit. Most likely your third finger is up too high and is touching that third string. So you just have to move that third finger down a little bit and you should get that string ringing nicely. If it's buzzing a little bit, like that, probably your first finger's backwards a little bit too far. So make sure it's right up nice and close to the fret. Now we're on to this note here, which is the second string with the third finger. Most people don't have a problem with that note, actually, to tell the truth. If it's too buzzy, like that, it's because it's too far back from the fret. You might find it sounds like that. So if you get it right up next to the fret, you'll get it sounding nice. Now the hardest note for most people here is this one here with the second finger. Now the reason that most people find this hard is because the third finger tends to lay down a little bit too flat and mute the thinner string. So a lot of people get this as their first D chord. Yeah, and the reason is simply here underneath the third finger is touching the thinner string. So you've got to arch those around a little bit. Make sure they're right on the tips, and that'll allow that string here to ring out nice and clearly. Now, It's definitely worth spending a little bit of time now on trying to get your D chord so it sounds really, really cool. Doing exactly what I just showed you there of strum. Pick out the notes one at a time and then adjust your fingers to make sure that each one sounds good. So you might go. And then when you've got it and you know they're all good, then strum it again at the end. It's really important that you go through this process lots and lots of times to make sure that your D chord sounds really cool. So before we go on and learn any more chords, stop the tape, have a little bit of a play around with your D chord, try and get it sound really sweet. Now, actually just a couple of things that I forgot to mention. First one is thumb position. Now, it's quite common for some people, including me, to play with their thumb sitting over the top of the guitar. And that's fine when you can play. But when you're really starting off as a beginner, you're much better off having the thumb around the back of the guitar. And the reason for this is because it's really helpful for when you're learning to play bar chords later on. If you've done no practice at all with the thumb around the back, you find this muscle here is going to be really, really weak. So, and when you're gripping your chords like that, you're developing this muscle, which is really going to help you with your bar chords and your power chords later on. So when you first start off, it's definitely important that you try and keep that thumb behind. It's also important to leave a little bit of a gap at the bottom of the guitar neck here. Now, a thing that I often say to my students is that you should imagine there's a bit of an electric cable running down the bottom of the guitar neck and that you're not allowed to touch it. That's a really good way of thinking about it, because what you don't want is your first finger leaning up on the side of the guitar neck. Now, again, later on that can be a really good thing, but just in these early stages, you want to make sure there's a little bit of space under here between the neck and your hand, and generally the palm of your hand, the flat of your hand, this part should not be touching the guitar neck. Yeah, so the parts that should be touching the guitar neck is your thumb, like the pad of your thumb here, and the ends of your fingers, and that's all. Now later on that's going to change. It's not the way that you would play guitar forever, but when you're starting, it's a really good idea to follow that bit of advice, and I will talk about a little bit later on in this course, or the method, that I'll explain to you when it's a good idea to do those things and when it's not. So for now, stop tape, practice your D chord, make sure you get every note really nice and clear, and then we're up for learning another chord.